Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosemary Bosky, Chief Housing Inspector of the Department of Building Inspection, and this is the San Francisco Fire Safety Task Force at its inaugural meeting on Tuesday, August 18th. It is about 6:10. We do have a quorum, and so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And with that, I would ask for the members to introduce themselves of the task force. Again, my name is Rosemary Bosky, Chief Housing Inspector. Dan?
Dan Lowry, Deputy Director of Building Inspections.
Johnston Ojo, the Health Department.
David Briggs, San Francisco PUC.
Steve Jones, retired Deputy Fire Chief, City of Alameda Fire.
Dan Nicosio, SFFD, Fire Marshal's Office.
Members, welcome. Also, the administrative staff, if you will introduce yourself
Matt Tchaikovsky.
with the Department of Building Inspection. So with that, our first item then is going to be to vote for the membership, to select the members are to vote for the chair of this particular task force. So with that, are there any nominations for the chair for the task force? Dr. Ojo.
I nominate Ms. Bosky.
Thank you, Dr. Ojo. Are there any other nominations for chair for the task force? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And actually, I am remiss, before we take that action, we do need, is there any public comment on this item? We're voting for the chair, and that's item number 3. There being none, then with this a unanimous vote, then I guess I'm now chair of the Fire Task Force. So thank you, members. So with that, we will then move to agenda item number 4, which is basically an introduction of the task force. And I am going to go ahead, I think for the record, it's probably best to read some items from the legislation that actually created the task force. This was sponsored by Supervisor Campos and co-sponsored by Supervisors Kim and Marr. So this particular task force is made up of 2 representatives from the Department of Building Inspection, 2 from the Fire Department, which includes the Fire Marshal. The representatives from the Department of Building Inspection shall also include a member from the Housing Division, 2 representatives from the Department of Public Health, 1 representative from the PUC, and then a city attorney that is assigned to attend the meetings and advise the task force. And at this point, I would like that individual to introduce himself. Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Lockritz. I'm the new head of the Code Enforcement team for the City Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Tom, and welcome.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this task force is, with respect to the several fires in multi-unit residential and multi-use buildings in which there has been tragic death, displacement of tenants, and with respect to the fact that several different agencies have authority over habitability issues of multiple unit residential and multi-use buildings in the city, the task force is charged with the following, and that is to review and make recommendations to the board with respect to legislation proposed by the board to improve fire safety in these buildings. The second item is to suggest to the Board of Supervisors amendments to the municipal code or other solutions that would improve fire safety in multi-residential and multi-use buildings, including but not limited to fire prevention measures, post-fire investigation, processing and resolution of complaints about code violations, interagency coordination and information sharing. And the third item is to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on the advisability of requiring the installation of fire alarms and sprinklers in existing buildings. So the time frame for the task force to do what it's charged, its mandates, is that we meet every 2 weeks for 3 months, and at the end of that particular point in time, we give a report to the Board of Supervisors. Now, these meetings are going to include another item that is also in the resolution, which is over the course of the meetings, we invite representatives of landlords, tenants, and small businesses to offer their perspectives with respect to the items that will be on the agenda. So, and that is why all of you that have been invited today see a very large guest list of stakeholders that have been invited today to today's meeting. So, within 3 months, approximately, unless that particular time frame is extended, we will be submitting our fact-finding and recommendations. Now, the sunset provision currently is 6 months from the date that this was effective, which was in mid-July. So that is what we're charged to do. And before I continue, I'd like to invite, we have a representative here from Supervisor Campos' office, and would you like to make any comments about this? Carolyn?
So I'd like to say thank you so much for all of you for being here. As you know, in District 9, there have been a number of fires and casualties and displacement related to those fires, and so we felt that we really wanted to have the expertise of all of you, of the departments, to come together and work to finding solutions so that we can prevent some of these terrible fires from happening in the future. And we look forward to hearing from you and members of the community and the tenants and landlord and small business community as well to address this. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Caroline. So with that, I'd like to invite my co-members on the task force if they have any opening comments they would like to make with respect to agenda item number 4. Are there any? Dan, would you answer? Thank you. Thank you.
We're always open to ideas and trying to improve the service we provide to people, residents of San Francisco. We have measures in place, codes, regulations, etc. And it's not a perfect system. A lot of it's reliant on the owners and the tenants of the buildings, etc. There's only so much we can do as an enforcement agency. So there's we come in with an open mind on this and come up with ideas on different solutions and new amendments, etc. But also with the understanding that we have to be responsible for ourselves too, as an owner and as the tenants, and getting the message out there. So that's part of it that we want to focus on is public awareness, public information, and public education, and getting the word out.
Thank you. Are there any other opening comments from other members of the task force? Perhaps if you can define your specific role as it relates to the task force, that might be helpful for our guests. Dr. Ojai, do you want to make some opening comments regarding the DPH's role?
Sure.
Thank you.
With DPH, my section is responsible for inspecting all the hotels in the city, and many of the violations that we run into have to do with clogging and cluttering, to the point that some of the rooms are actually uninhabitable. And from time to time, we've gone to the extent, based on what the health code allows, to actually declare some of these units uninhabitable, at which point we have no choice but to issue an order to vacate. At that time, APS might come in and assist in placement of individuals in the space. So a few years back, we had a clogging and cluttering group that got together, task force that got together, and we came up with a lot of good recommendations that some of the departments have been implementing. It helps, but I think with DPH we have quite a challenge when you have people that are unable to take care of themselves. We work very closely with DPH and of course our mental health section to make sure that we provide very humane services to this individual. At the same time, make sure that we connect them to appropriate services that they can access to the mediation of the problem we have in the SRO. But it's quite a challenge, so we have great experiences in issues that may be causing fire, not to talk of people using hot plates to cook in this very small room, but dealing with a lot of fire hazards. So I'm glad to get new ideas and opinions in terms of that, but at the same time to make good recommendations. Supervisor.
Thank you, Dr. Ojo. Mr. Briggs, do you have anything that you would like to add as far as how the PUC intersects with all this?
Sure. In case it isn't clear already, when a fire service is required inside of a building, whether it's upgraded or new, the PUC's job is to construct the fire service and bring it to the building and make any modifications to the water system for flow and pressure to make that happen. I wish it were quick and easy and inexpensive to do. It is not always the case. So that's probably why I'm here, is that it can take some time, it can cost money, and it can be complicated to coordinate with other city departments when you work in the street of San Francisco.
Thank you. And then with respect to DBI, Dan, do you have anything you would like to add?
It'll be nice to work with this task force. We've worked with the fire departments and the other working groups here to look at any code changes that we might have to adopt for the future to make these buildings just safe. We could talk about outreach, what we could do to the public, so we can inform the tenants of what they can do to help provide safety to these buildings.
And I would like to compliment that. Thank you, Dan. Again, Rosemary Bosky, Chief Housing Inspector. One of the interesting things that I remember working on the residential hotel sprinkler ordinance with Tom Harvey, who was then the fire marshal, was that even though the SRO task force existed at that point in time, there really wasn't a proper vetting of all the moving parts of that ordinance before it actually went into effect. And I do want to commend Supervisor Campos for creating this task force to be able to do that by not only bringing the pertinent city agencies together, but inviting a lot of expertise in the community and those that are primarily affected by the tragedy of these fires to give us input, and so that we can properly vet this and give the appropriate recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. So I have to tell you, having to live through that situation, this is really a great tool and opportunity to get everybody here so that we can hear from everyone, learn, and give you the best information we can to go forward. So with that, as far as DBI's role, the Housing Inspection Division does inspections of what was primarily the focus of this task force, which are apartment buildings. That's typically 3 units or more. The majority of these buildings are older housing stock, and they're older, as we all know, than more of the major cities within the state of California. If we look at the 20,000 apartment buildings in San Francisco, and then take from that the larger buildings, 7 units or more, that's about 5,100 buildings, and about 86% of those buildings have been built before 1970. So that means as far as fire early detection and suppression, the codes in the top were, when those buildings were built, that's 45 years ago. And so if you look at the housing code, which is primarily a maintenance code, and you look at the fire suppression requirements in there, that essentially is basically asking for sprinklering of garbage rooms, garbage chutes, linen closets, certain dead-end corridors, and things of that nature. Nothing has really changed in that code since the 1960s. So one of the things we'll be looking at is what types of recommendations to make to the board with respect to something like that, which is primarily a maintenance code that is applied retroactively to existing buildings. So that is one thing. Housing inspectors are out in these buildings every day, as well as the fire department. And we're also going to be looking at those areas where we can intersect better with the fire department and give additional coverage. And I'll give you one excellent example, and that is, ever since I've been a housing inspector going back to 1990, if we're going in and doing a common area inspection of what we call a routine inspection of an apartment building, and we see that they have what we call a supervision box, which is the central component control panel for a central alarm system, and they're not all being created equal. If we've got something that was put in many decades ago, it's going to look far different than what would be installed today. But we would typically want to write on our notice of violation that they need to have that certified every year, the UL approved certification that the fire code requires, and currently the housing code does not. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer to put that in the housing code so that we can give better coverage. When our inspectors are out there and they don't see the certification, that's something that we could do to kind of help you out. There's little things like this that we might want to make those recommendations because we understand that the fire department is stretched thin in some instances, and you need to fight fires. And so if we're out there, we want to do everything we can when our inspector's in place to help out. And so that will be some of the ongoing discussion that we have where you think that's appropriate. We'll ask you to identify that for us. So that's just one thing that we might be able to do, and that's kind of one of that was like item number A in the list of things that the ordinance would like us to cover. So that's just by way of example. So with that, I don't have any further opening comments. Dan?
Dan DeCosia, Fire Marshal Office. Just like to add to the fire department what our role is.
Right.
I kind of better understand as we went down the line, but our opening statement was supposed to be here. Fire department's role is all 8-unit buildings or more, R2 apartment buildings and R1s. We inspect annually. We have engine companies that go out and do annual inspections. We inspect the common areas. We do not get into the individual units, and that's where there tends to be a problem. So we'll look at base building systems, fire alarm systems, fire suppression systems, fire department access, egress, base building systems, and that's what we do on an annual basis. We do not get inside the units, so maintenance of smoke alarms, things like that, good housekeeping rules, things like that. We do not get inside. We don't see those. We don't have insight into that. It's nice to know that you go from 3 units on up. We're at 8 units and on up. Fire code is the maintenance code. And you do write violations and notices of corrections for anything in violation thereof. Thank you.
And, a clarification for the housing inspectors is that when we're doing a routine inspection, we're basically dealing with the common areas. We're not in the units. Unless we're doing, say, a city attorney task force case, or we are dealing with a complaint within a specific unit or units, or we have a certain history of a particular building where we believe it's warranted under the authority of the building official. But when we're doing those systematic inspections, we're typically not, at least for apartment buildings, going inside the units unless one of those factors is usually at play. So that's good to go ahead and clarify that further. So again, we are on agenda item number 4. These are our opening comments. And with that, if there are no other opening comments by the members, then what I'd like to do is open this up for public comment, and each member would then have up to 3 minutes. So is there any public comment on agenda item number 4? There being none, we will then move to agenda item number 5, which is addressing the multi-unit and multi-unit use buildings. And again, we're primarily talking about apartment buildings of 3 units or more that have the greatest risk of fire safety hazards. So I think I'll go ahead and get this started, and that is one of the things that we've been looking at are the wood construction non-rated buildings. And we're trying to get a handle on how many are of those in our housing stock because we don't have an exact inventory. And we're looking at that. Hopefully we'll be able to bring something to you at future meetings. We believe that these typically are the greatest risk in general. And I will tell you that early in May, I had the privilege of doing a workshop with Captain Jones. And a lot of information that is on the website was shared, things I didn't know. I had guessed, but the fact that fires usually start in units, and it's usually higher risk activities, smoking, cooking, unauthorized heat appliances, and then electrical fires and things of that nature. And so 90% of that particular workshop, which people can see on SF.gov.tv, had to do with these particular practices and how they can then overwhelm the existing fire systems and particularly these older buildings. So that is out there, and with that, that is one of the things that we'd like to look at and get input from the members of the public and the members of the task force as to the size of the buildings that we should be looking at that are the highest risk, and any other factors. One of the things that DBI is also doing is we're moving to a new computerized system. You've probably heard that DBI and the planning department are going to and Excella is the vendor. And one of the first things that we decided to do was to add fields to Excella so that when our inspectors are out in the field, that we actually can put within the database certain amenities having to do with these buildings to get a better profile of the building, such as if they have exterior stairs, fire escapes, etc. These types of things, because we don't really have, you would think we would, but we don't have the greatest database as to which buildings have all these amenities. And so that's one of the things that we're going to do. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and stop there and invite the other members to give their thoughts on which are the greatest risk buildings for the type of fires that we've been experiencing and what have been the genesis of this task force. So any other member comment? Dan, would you like to start? Dan Lowry, Deputy Director,
Dan Lowry,
DBI.
Deputy Director of Building Inspections. A lot of these fires that we've seen are in buildings that sometimes are over-occupied, sometimes the electrical systems are overloaded, and that's what constitutes a fire. Some of these fires have small cooking facilities that don't supposed to be within the building and that could start a fire. So we're looking into these buildings and seeing what we can do to help prevent this.
Thank you. Dr. Ojo?
Sure. With DPH, we also inspect, we have 2 inspectional units. Those senior health inspectors that inspect all the SROs and all the hotels in the city. And then you have those code enforcement group that inspects the apartments. We also inspect apartments that are 3 or more units. And we only inspect the common areas. However, when we have complaints, we actually go inside the units to make sure that we identify whatever issues may be existing in those units. For the hotels, the upper echelon type of hotels like the Hilton and the Marriott that we have in the city, we only inspect the common areas. However, we have a group of over 200 SROs that we actually do room-to-room inspection. We go inside, depending on the classification, either once a year or twice a year. But most importantly, we respond to complaints in all the 800 or so hotels and all the about 17,000 apartments, 3 units or more that we have in the city. Some of the basic problems that we deal with all the time is the issue of deferred maintenance and the lack of the initiative from the hotel operators from doing their own routine inspections. Because we strongly believe that if they have a proactive program in place to be working through some of those SROs, the conditions in those rooms cannot be as bad as what we are seeing. And we also have problems with smoking in the rooms, in a heavily cluttered room with flammable materials like accumulated newspapers, soil, the personal clothing, and so on and so forth. So anything we can do to assist those tenants to reduce those conditions will surely to help in terms of making recommendations for issues that contribute to fire hazards. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ojo. Mr. Briggs, is there anything from the PUC standpoint as far as?
No.
No, I wouldn't think so, right?
No.
Okay, so then it's pretty much us and fire. So, what are, obviously we don't want people to take down their smoke detectors and do some of these high-risk behaviors. I mean, there's those things. But as far as the buildings themselves, what are the characteristics? Age, type of construction? What are some of the things that you're all saying that we need to note that we should focus on?
Well, if you look at life safety in mathematical terms, it's a function of time. Can we control the fire, contain the fire, compartmentalize the fire long enough for the occupants to get out of the building safely, for the fire department to respond, to extinguish the fire, maintain the integrity of the structure, long enough for us to get in there and do our job. Part of that's going to be early warning, whether you're in each individual unit, whether the smoke alarms are working, whether the base building fire alarm is working, and whether you have passive and active fire protection systems. So an active system would be a sprinkler system. Passive system would be your fire barriers, fire partitions. Are they intact? Are they to contain the fire long enough? So you have to look at all those things when you evaluate these fires, and did they function properly? Were they maintained properly? Part of the problem you have in the city is high-density old wood balloon frame construction. You get a fire in the wall, it goes right up to the attic, and then it spreads across the whole structure because you don't have any fire stopping. It's just the nature of the buildings we have here in the city. So my opening statement, which I think is step number one, we do have regulations out there already, but we need to follow those, apply those, and get the word out there as well. We have to take responsibility, the tenants themselves, the business owners themselves as well. We can take steps, whether we talk about sprinkling and fire alarms, retroactive enforcement. But the main thing is maintenance and public information, getting the word out to the tenants.
Once again, Steve Jones, retired Deputy Fire Chief, City of Alameda. I'm not a member of the task force, but I was asked to come here by Mr. Brian Campos to offer some perspective and opinion. Reading the agenda and hearing some of the opening comments, I think the success of this task force is going to be driven through the tenants and the landlords, not the city, not the fire department. I mean, the fire department can offer guidance, and then everybody can offer guidance, but if you're going to be successful here, you're going to need buy-in from the landlord with the guidance, and then buy-in from the tenants so they make the changes. Because like the captain said, they don't go into single apartments, and that's generally where a lot of your problems start. Okay, they do 8 units or more, so they're not in there. And I guarantee the Fire Prevention Bureau is overwhelmed. So you can depend on them just to kind of clear the air for guidance. But to drive this needs to be driven through city staff, landlords, and tenants, especially landlords and tenants. If you can come out with recommendations that the landlords buy into and the tenants support, you cut your losses.
As far as behavior.
Yes.
And it raises an interesting point, and that is that an inspector can walk out of a building and then several bad things can happen as far as higher fire risk. You can have the second means of egress blocked, you can have the smoke detectors taken down, you can have unauthorized cooking, heating appliances, smoking, and all those things create a much higher risk of a fire in a particular building not being controlled, or that it results in injury or death or property damage. So that is something that we're always, as inspectors, struggling against. We do have members here from our Code Enforcement Outreach Program, our DBI program. I see them here, and they are very much a part of what DBI does to try and get the word out, and working with both tenants and landlords to encourage the proper behaviors. And we were talking about the residential hotels. They have very, very good programs where they work with the fire department on workshops to help with those particular behaviors in that segment of buildings. We don't necessarily have that. We're starting to look at that with respect to the apartment buildings. I want to ask some of the other city officials that are sitting here. Captain Jones, do you have anything you would like to add at this? I mean, you're seeing a lot of plan checking and other things going on. Is there anything you would like to add to this at this point?
Not particularly. I was just actually looking at some of the existing codes regarding fire alarms. And if we can find a way to put hardwired smoke detectors, smoke alarms, not detectors, smoke alarms in units, I think that would be beneficial.
Thank you. Also, we have some members from the DBI Code Advisory Committee, and I am going to open this up to public comment. But I also see one of the fire protection engineers that is on our Code Advisory Committee, Jerry Cunningham. Do you have anything you would like to add to this with your expertise as a fire protection engineer?
Well, one small correction. I have resigned from the Code
Have you?
Advisory
Okay, all right.
So I'm no longer a member of that committee. And I'm also a retired fire protection engineer. So fire safety is a subject that's close to my heart. And, I hope this, I'll have some comments later.
Okay.
To say, I hope this committee comes up with some good stuff.
Thank you, thank you. So with that, if there is no more comments from the members, we are on agenda item number 5. We're looking at the buildings with the greatest risk. I'd like to open this up for public comment. Who would like to speak on this particular matter? I would think that we would have some. Sir.
If this isn't the right agenda item, tell me, but I'll have a few things to say. My name is Tim Carrick. I'm a rental property owner, and I've been in the property management business, managing other people's buildings for over 40 years. And I've always taken a great interest in fire issues. And I was in business when the first common hallway detector ordinance was passed 30 years ago, whenever that was, that requires the panels you were mentioning. And I was in the business when the ordinance passed that required detectors in the apartments, battery or hardwired in some types of units. And then recently the law just changed. We had to replace all the smoke detectors with ones with 10-year batteries. And one thing I'm wondering is there any really good data about what happened in these bad fires? I've had 3 fires I've dealt with in my buildings or clients' buildings in the last 40 years. And I notice fires, what happens in fires all the time in the city because I'm interested in it. The fire department here does a great job. Most of the fires that get in, it's contained to one room or a unit, and that's it. They just get in there quickly and suppress it, but sometimes things really go bad. And I'm wondering, in the cases of these fires that have gone bad, we really know why that's happened, so we can direct our efforts at things that would have the most bang for the buck, so to speak, in trying to stop the ones that get out of control. The fire department's usually there in 5 minutes, right? And that's really amazing.
Well, Rosemary, can I jump in on that?
Thank you. So additional public comment, Jerry?
Yeah. San Francisco is filled with a lot of older buildings. And wood construction, the structural frame is dried out. Everything is part of the building is pretty dry, maybe even some dry rot in places. And a lot of buildings, older buildings, are leaky vertically, meaning there's a lot of pathways for fire and smoke to move quickly from wherever a fire starts to a level above, or maybe all the way up to an attic, where it goes across the roof, under the roof. So that's just a reality of the building stock that's out there. But it's also true that today the contents of a unit, a dwelling unit, are burned quicker and hotter than it did 20 years ago, 50 years ago. It's just, there's more plastics. People have more plastics. So fires can get started and in an unsprinkled building pretty much be out of control by the time the fire department gets there. So I don't know how long it took the fire department to get to that building at 22nd and Mission. But I'm sure it was well within their guidelines. But that fire got started and boom, it was out of control. So I think that's something that the committee needs to keep in mind when they're looking at question of what buildings need to be protected, if anything needs to be added, any additional protections are required. And then another question of what. So there's some good issues to wrestle with.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Thank you. No problem. One thing I wanted to mention, it's been a pet issue of mine for many years. When the ordinance went into effect that required smoke detectors in every apartment, we went out and we managed 100 and some buildings, put all these smoke detectors in, and immediately we started getting calls from people about their smoke detectors going off when they took a shower, boiled water. Those are the two typical things, sometimes cooking. And, we couldn't figure this out, but why it was happening. And then a few years later, I found out because of something about at home, the reason was the kind of detectors that we and virtually everybody else put in, which were the cheapest and the available ones, are called ionization detectors. And in my opinion, they're complete crap because they go off when people take a shower or cook food if it's anywhere near the smoke detector. And in a studio apartment, in a one-bedroom apartment particularly, it's always going to be near the smoke detector. So when you mentioned people disabling their smoke detectors, what I found when I would go inspect buildings back in those days is I would see smoke detectors on the kitchen counter. I would see them smashed. And what we had in the apartments was not detectors, we had brackets on the ceiling. And the reason was these detectors were useless junk. They were noisemakers in these kind of apartments. I think if in a bedroom where there's no source that made them go off, they're probably fine because there's some ordinances that required us to put them in bedrooms when you take out a building permit, and something you may be familiar with. So my company, what I found out in my own home, the reason, there's another type called photoelectric smoke detectors, and they don't do that. So my company said, every detector we ever use has got to be a photoelectric. They're harder to get, they cost a little more, but they save money because you don't have to keep going out trying to figure out why. So I wrote a letter to the San Francisco fire chief probably 20 or 25 years ago about this and telling him what I thought. And he wrote back, which I just came across his letter the other day, saying, well, yeah, they had no information and so they didn't think there was a problem. But you see these articles in the paper, there was a fire, kids died in an apartment somewhere in the Bay Area, and the fire alarm didn't go off. And I bet you 9 times out of 10, this is the reason. And about 5 years ago, I think it was the fire chief, I think the active fire chief of Albany, California, had an article in the paper actually on the same topic I'm talking about. His reasons were a little different than mine because they react differently to different types of fires. But anyway, my point is, with the fires we've had, I think we should know whether some of the ones getting out of control and people getting hurt is because they didn't have detectors in their apartments that woke them up in time to go save themselves and to alert the fire department, turn on the hallway system and get people out of the building. The law that just passed requiring 10-year batteries detectors, I think those are all photoelectric from what I can tell, which is great. But I just bought 2 for my place, and one of the 2 was defective. And I talked to a maintenance guy that works for the company that bought my management company. He said they're having a lot of problems with these new detectors having a high defective rate. So I think that's something else that the city and the fire system needs to pay attention to. It's like when the fire chief told me we didn't know anything about the ionizations being bad. I can guarantee you they're bad. But somehow it didn't get up to the fire chief in San Francisco that was a problem. So I think that'd be a real good place to start. So I bet you, are you guys enforcing the 10-year battery ordinance, Susan? I mean, it's a state law, and I know about the company that manages my buildings now, they went out and did all that. Who's enforcing that law? Anybody?
Right, I'm not going to take questions because we've got a lot more public comment, but I'll be happy to research it afterwards.
That's
It's not in the
something that could
housing
be
code.
dealt with quickly that might help a lot.
If I
Get rid of
could-
the ionization.
If I could ask you
detectors that are
to
in buildings.
bring your comments to a conclusion only because we want to try and keep to 3 minutes, but we may have other people, but thank you, that was very, very helpful. And I'll follow up with you on that.
I'll make it brief.
Oh, yeah.
This gentleman is exactly what people need in every building in San Francisco. You need to have advocates that are building managers. Somebody that's paying attention to smoke detectors, paying attention to overheated extension cords, paying attention to the wiring in the building. That's where it's gonna make a difference, is when you have somebody that, because you can't expect San Francisco Fire to go in and, they don't do that.
Housing does do that.
Okay,
We're
but-
constantly
but-
writing up extension cords and things of that
But
nature.
if you had
Yeah.
strong leaders within apartment owners and landlords, that's where the rubber meets the road here. Somebody like him that's gonna go in and kick a little ass on the people that live there and say, this is what we have to do so you don't die in a fire.
Okay, any other public comment on this? I'm sure we must have more. Any other public comment on this particular item? And that is, as far as the most at-risk buildings in the city? Charlie?
Charlie Goss with the San Francisco Apartment Association. We're talking about at-risk buildings, and I'm just wondering, from PUC's perspective, just because I don't know too much about this, how water is supplied to buildings that currently have sprinklers on the ground floor, if in these older buildings there's enough water pressure, if the water pump system needs to be upgraded, what the cost of upgrading the water pump system is, and that sort of thing. Just because it's so far out of the sphere of what we do on a normal day-to-day basis.
Okay, so is there any other public comment on this particular item?
Mike Grossman.
Yes.
The fire department has data on fires going way, way back. So I think that it would behoove this committee to get a handle on what buildings are more at risk based on that data, rather than sort of the latest fire that made the news, because that information is there, and I think it would provide a good foundation for any proposed requirements going forward, if it was actually to be tagged to some real world data.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Mr. Reed?
Just to give a little background, my name's Jim Reed. I'm also on the code advisory committee. I'm an electrical contractor that deal with a lot of fire alarms. We certify about 600 alarms a year, and I've been involved since the onset in 1978 of the systems that we put in the late 70s and 80s. As the biggest risk from my perspective, is the audibility of the bells that were put in those buildings back in the late 70s and 80s. I don't think they are even near what the requirements are today, even though they were supposed to be. So you'll go into a building and they'll have one bell on every floor. You don't test, to go into the bedroom like you're supposed to do, close the door, have the ambient noise level. And so I think that could be one thing to be looked at. And I won't go into more detail, but I think I want to get involved when the committee looks at testing requirements and how it goes, how people don't adhere to those annual or quarterly or semi-inspections. And I think there's a gap where contractors such as me know that, but I have no authority. But if there was a way to transmit that information to the fire department, there might be a way to at least get involved with those people to get them to do what they're supposed to be doing.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Gabriel Medina with Mission Economic Development Agency, and actually just want to kind of echo and add on to what this gentleman in the back said about the data. I think that would, the data would probably have some pretty obvious findings. Older buildings are more at risk. Older buildings probably also have a higher density of occupant as well. I know for the Mission District, that's what we've seen with a lot of the rent-controlled units, having the higher density. So, I mean, if that is the priority of enforcement for safety, I think that's a good direction to go.
Thank you.
But I would like to see the data.
Any other public comment on this issue? Ben?
Just a general public comment. So
Hi everyone, my name is Ben and I actually work for Genoa Housing Clinic, and then also we work with the Code Enforcement Outreach Program that's actually funded by DBI. And one of our, we work with a lot of tenants living in the residential hotels and also apartments, and we know that currently the fire department is offering workshops to residential hotels, but not necessarily not for apartment tenants. So I think that's one of the things that we would like to see, more education workshops for apartment dwelling units.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this particular item? Mr. Briggs, do you want to comment at all on the water pressure issue? I want to give you an opportunity on the issue that Charlie Goss mentioned about water pressure. Is there something that you would like to add at this point about that?
Maybe a clarifying question. Are you asking what the PUC does to ensure existing fire services inside of a building have adequate flow and pressure?
Yeah, essentially. And if certain older buildings, perhaps of a larger unit count, I'm not sure what the count would be, if you believe they would be required to upgrade the pumps based on the current water pressure, and sort of what the cost and involvement is, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so there's a delineation of responsibility when it comes to a fire service. The PUC's responsibility, for the most part, stops at the curb. Once we enter in the building, that is DBI and fire department and the owner's responsibility for functionality, annual testing, performance. If there is some kind of shortcoming, and it is related to the water distribution system, then I get involved. But the PUC is not involved with annual inspections and performance testing. But when it is brought to, and then the fire department does a series of tests. I mean, they will test the hydrants in the vicinity. A variety of groups will test the adequacy of the fire suppression system inside the building. And if something's related to the city's water distribution system, then the PUC gets involved. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. So is there any more public comment for agenda item number 5? And keep in mind, we've got several meetings to go. This is the initial go-round on some of these particular items. There being none, at this point, we're basically doing some fact gathering. Do the members want to entertain any particular motion or action on this? Or are we just basically at this point in time doing some fact gathering? We can come back with some additional recommendations later. Just at the pleasure of the members, is there any other comments you wish to make on this item? There being none, that we'll move to agenda item number 6, which is the interdepartmental code enforcement procedures. So I'll start with, as far as the San Francisco Housing Code is concerned, it does have in Chapter 9 items on it that require the property owner to maintain certain fire suppression and early detection systems. And it also requires that when we do the routine inspection, that if there is a fire escape, that the property owner demonstrate that it is in good working and operational order. And that's just one of the things that we require. We look at the fire extinguishers, we look at egress, and we're looking to see that the trouble light is not on for the supervision box for the central alarm system. We're looking at smoke detectors, carbon monoxide alarms, and things of that nature. And those inspections occur at least every 5 years, and every time we're in a building based on a complaint, we're looking at these items as we're walking through the common area of the building. And I do have one of my housing inspectors here. Robert, do you have any additional things you want to add? Because you probably were doing one of these inspections today. You want to identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, I'm Robert Wohlers. I'm a housing inspector, but I also used to certify fire alarm systems. I have a C10 license. And actually the thing that I heard, I would reiterate what you said, because we can go into a building once a year to either certify or to inspect as a housing inspector, to come to an apartment building once every 5 years at a minimum. But then as soon as we're gone, it's the people that live there. And I would point out that any apartment building with 16 units or more has a resident manager. So maybe we can get them more involved in some of this too. Would be helpful.
Thank you, Rob. Robert. So that's, at least from a DBI standpoint. Dan, do you want to add anything as far as code enforcement? I mean, if we see a violation, we'll write a notice of violation, we'll write a notice. It gives the property owner a very specific amount of time. If we see other issues, we may also make a referral to the fire department. We don't have an information sharing system yet within the city. That may be something that we look at ultimately, so that if we write a notice of violation, they can see it and vice versa. That will happen with the Department of Planning through the Excella process, but that's not yet moved on to other city agencies such as the Department of Public Health and the fire department. So that's one thing we do. If we don't get compliance, then we're going to record an order on the property. We will assess our costs against that property. If it's not paid, we will lien the property. And obviously, if we've got life safety issues that we've cited for lack of egress or something of that nature, or that it's obstructed, or that the fire alarm system is down, or the smoke detectors are not operable, or that there has been a situation where they've painted over or encumbered the required fire sprinkler system, things of that nature, we will take those particular cases through a code enforcement process. If we don't get compliance, and given the accumulation of the violations, we will ultimately refer that case to the city attorney, and we're fairly aggressive with respect to that. So that's our code enforcement process. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, as far as building code enforcement process, once there is a fire, we issue a notice of violation, and we try to work with the owner to get a permit and perform some life safety duties right away. Part of the problem we have on this, they have a fire. It's timely. They're dealing with their insurance companies, and they lag on it. They let time go by. So what we try to do in the code enforcement process is give it a shorter envelope, just so we could help push the process through, so they could get an architect, engineer, get a redesign, and get the proper permits. We try to work with them to get the proper permits, so they can start performing the work on the units to get them available as soon as possible.
Thank you, Dan. Dr. Ojo?
Yes. Hello. Johnson Ojo with the Health Department. The Health Department doesn't actually have the mandate to enforce any fire codes. So every time we run into issue that we consider may be a fire hazard, we refer them to both the fire department and the DBI, and we work very closely together in terms of sending referral within all the different departments. The good thing for the health department in terms of code enforcement is that the section 581 of the health code mandates that every building owner or tenant have to maintain their property in a safe and healthy way for all the occupants of that property, and that anyone that violates any section of that code is subject to fine and possible issuance of vacation orders. Recently, we added a fine of $1,000 per day if any violation remain uncorrected. But I think our code enforcement process is relatively very effective, and I'm very proud of it, because of the fact that we issue 7-day notices, 14-day notices for all that structure, and when we do our follow-up after the 7 or 14 days, if there's no compliance, we issue a citation on the spot. We gather information in terms of pictures and so on and so forth, and we hold a public hearing every Tuesday. In fact, this morning we had one at 9:30 every Tuesday. And that hearing, which I do hold on the hearing officer once in a while, it's one of two things: either you've complied or you haven't. And if you have not, there's a likelihood that a penalty will be issued. But usually we refer it to our monthly Director of Public Health hearing, at which point you will be levied that $1,000 fine, or you can, depending on the conditions, we can give you more time or issue a notice, declare it uninhabitable to vacate. It's difficult to do that with the hotels. We can't go on vacate or issue a vacation order for a whole hotel. But if there's a specific room that is involved, yes, that we can do very, very quickly. The most difficult part that we're trying to work with, and APS has been very, very cooperative. We recently, as part of our code process, added a component to it whereby we have a mental health group to actually provide what we call early intervention for some at-risk tenants that we have in some of these units. Because technically, we know for sure, our inspectors can almost tell whether or not the client is going to comply. When you look at the condition of the room, and you look at the condition of the client himself or herself, you know there's no amount of notices that you're going to issue that this individual is going to comply with. So with that, Director of Public Health was kind enough to give us what we call the psych liaison, a social worker now that is working with my inspectors and the APS to make sure that we provide outreach to all these individuals. But the catch of all these things is that I think we need to hold the operators more accountable. We need to be more proactive. I've had a lot of good suggestions in terms of making sure that smoke detectors are checked from time to time, and that property managers should make sure that all these things are operational. In SRO hotels, it's a little better now than what they used to be. Rosemary probably remember that. But 15 or 20 years ago, we used to have a lot of fires in the SRO hotel because of the hoarding and smoking and cooking situation. At that time, there was another task force that was actually set up that went to work, and that is how a lot of the new codes have been put in place. So with DPH, we don't have the powers to enforce any fire codes, but we do refer them to TBI, and the fire department never will run it.
Thank you, Dr. Eljo. Fire Marshal DeCosio, do you have, it might be helpful to talk about your code enforcement process. You basically characterized it, but for those that might not be that familiar with it.
Yes, we receive complaints from a number of different people and agencies, private residents, citizens here at our website can send us an email, a letter, call us. We receive complaints that way. Other departments refer complaints to us. Our engine companies, when they go out and they see a deficiency out there, they'll note it, and it'll come to our fire prevention as a complaint, and then we'll follow up on it. The R2s, R1s, we're mandated to inspect them manually, and we do. The engine companies go out there and inspect them. Also, we have a high-rise section for residential high-rises and business high-rises, any high-rises, but we inspect the high-rises as well. So there's some redundancy there with the residential inspections. The complaints and violations rise to different levels. We look at them, a complaint with a fire extinguisher that maybe has, it's still in the green but hasn't been serviced 2 months overdue, doesn't rise to the level of a fire alarm system being out, a sprinkler system being down, block exits, etc. So we take all the complaints, we evaluate them, we triage them, and the big three, your egress, your fire alarm, your sprinkler system, we have a quick turnaround on those. 48 hours or less. Egress is immediate. You can respond immediately and take actions accordingly. That's helpful for the process. But and then smaller items, we give notice of corrections. And then if they don't comply, then we go to notice of violation. And then if that still doesn't work, then we write a citation.
Thank you. And you had mentioned earlier about education and information. So even though these departments are charged with code enforcement, we all have robust information on our websites and do a lot with respect to education. DBI has the Code Enforcement Outreach Program, and sitting to my right is one of the members from the SF Apartment Association. I have other members here as well. Ben is one of them. Bativa is another. And we're constantly working with tenants and property owners to make sure that they are that they have the education, that they understand what the high-risk behaviors are, so we don't have to get to a point to write a notice of violation. We also in DBI started something about 10 years ago so that when we go out to do a routine inspection, we send a package to the property owner so they see what we're going to look at. We have a list up on our website of at least 33 items that we want the property owner to look at on an annual basis, and a lot of that has to do with fire safety. So all that being said, Dr. Ojo touched about this, and one of the most difficult fire hazard situations as far as behavioral issues that we have to deal with is hoarding and cluttering. So DBI has a pilot program along with DPH, DOS, which we've actually met in this particular room, and APS, and I have a housing inspector assigned to deal with those issues, work with the property owners and the tenants groups to try and deal with issues that arise from that, because obviously egress and other issues usually are severely affected as far as fire hazards are concerned. So we have all these things going on with respect to this, and one of the things that I think we will be doing here is looking how we can get better coverage and working more closely with the fire department. The fire marshal talked about the fire engines going out and doing inspections, and of course, obviously, the first thing that those engines have to do is deal with fire. So if they get a call while they're trying to do an inspection of the building, off they go to be able to deal with a fire. So we'll be having further discussions with you on how the housing inspectors can help out further with that. That definitely is something that we'll look to and see what we can do in the future and bring some recommendations back to the task force as far as that's concerned. Are there any other comments from the members on this issue before we open this up to public comment? There being no further comment from the members, so then let's open this up. This is item number 6, interdepartmental code enforcement procedures related to fire hazards. Do we have any public comment on this particular item?
Once again, if you get good buy-in from the apartment owners, the landlords, and the property managers, is where you make the big difference. You can't, the fire department many times goes in once a year, building department goes in once a year. That's not gonna cut it. You have to make the difference with the people that are there all the time. The owners of the buildings have to take responsibility along with the people that manage it, not the city. The city can certainly offer guidance, but I want to make sure my point gets across here. If you're going to make a difference, it's not going to be the people that work for the city. It's going to be the people that own the building and manage it.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this particular item? There being none, then we will go to agenda item number 7, which is for future meeting topics. Now, we also have, and we have all these items here, the agenda, the ordinance, and a general schedule of general topics for future meetings. So our next meeting would be September 8th in this room from 10 to 12. That's Tuesday. And there'll be a continuation of some of the items that we talked about today. We'll gather some more information. But we'll be talking about fire alarm provisions at that meeting and other items. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about because this has been brought up in public comment, the information as far as the fires are concerned. And I want to commend the fire department for sending DBI, at least we have for the last several months gotten, report of a list of buildings that have had fires where the damage has exceeded $1,000. So we're looking at that data. We're going to take that, we're putting that on a spreadsheet to add more profile information about those buildings. Unit numbers, construction type, any other information that we can think of, share that with you. And then we're going to come back to this task force and ask the rest of you for additional input. Jim, I saw you shaking your head. So do you have some other thoughts about that?
Not yet, but I'd be
Okay,
interested.
but hold that thought, because when we were talking about looking to seeing how these buildings perform, I will let you know that one time I went through a fire damaged building on Mission with one of my inspectors, and what we were doing was we were looking to see, knowing what the provisions are in the housing code, how did the building perform, and what were some of the things that we should look at that might be easy fixes and not the most invasive things that we could do within the housing code that might be retroactive. So these are the kind of things we also want to look at first. What are the least invasive things that we could look at first before we start tackling the big issues, which are additional sprinklering requirements, maybe modifying the current alarm systems in these buildings, because we all know that they're occupied buildings, and when you start doing that, not that we shouldn't necessarily, but there are a lot of moving parts to that. So we're putting that together, and I will have a prototype of what some of that will look like for the next meeting. We'll probably have some discussions between now and then. If there's any particular data that you would like to see that we might have, we'll put when the building was constructed and some other things on there, and then go from there, and then we'll have some additional questions on that. So again, any other public comment? Wait a minute, let me back up here. We're talking about future items. So do the members have anything particularly that you would like to see on the agenda for our meeting that is going to be September 8th? I got a little ahead of myself there.
I think the one you just mentioned is perfect.
And that's that's kind of going to be something that will take a while to do. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open this up for public comment in just a second. Thank you. So any other items from the members that you would like to see on the next agenda? With that, I'm going to open this item up for public comment. Jerry, did you have an item?
Well, I would suggest that the review of where there is are fire problems out there, that there be some kind of an attempt to classify, put some kind of a scale in there, a classification system, so that buildings that can be addressed by fairly straightforward, easy solutions can be identified. Solutions can be identified for those buildings. Maybe something a little more challenging, such as upgrading the fire system in other buildings. And maybe there are buildings out there that really ought to have sprinkler systems that don't. I would say to the committee to think about, if this committee was meeting 1 year ago, before the fire at 22nd and Mission, would you have identified that building as a building that requires sprinklers? In hindsight, it seems like maybe the answer is yes, but maybe that's a category of building that requires more protection than others. So I would like to see some kind of a categorization where the level of protection can go up as the risk goes up.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? We are looking at future topics for our future meetings, our next meeting being September 8th.
Could you expound more what discussion of possible fire alarm provisions means? I don't understand that.
That will be looking at the existing fire alarm systems within the existing buildings, and looking at that and having a discussion with respect to the members as to what else they would think is important in relationship to the fires we've had.
So the common hallway system is basically in all these buildings.
That's what's in the housing code, correct.
That's the one you're referring to, though, in terms of other types?
And there could be other things discussed as well.
Okay.
Any other public comment on this item? There being none, then we're moved now to general public comment on items that were on today's agenda. Is there any public comment with respect to general public comment?
Rosemary?
Yes.
I just want to add a fact And that is, I mean, I've been in the fire department for 23 years. I don't think there's nearly as many fires as when I came in. I mean, if you read the papers, you're like, oh my God, the whole city's on fire. But the truth is, and I just looked at some statistics, and I think I provided them in that
Workshop.
workshop that I did with you a few months ago down in the library. But fires have basically been reduced by 63% between 2011 and 1980. I mean, that's only 31 years. So we have 63% less fires now in homes than we had in 1980. That's based on statistics kept by the NFPA. So that's what I always find amazing when you read the paper and there's a big fire. It's like, oh my God. But when I came in, and I remember Dan too, I'm sure, didn't you remember, you went through a lot of fires?
Yes.
We don't go to nearly as many fires. And then, of course, the old timers that were all retired now told us, hey, kid, you know, you should have been here 30 years ago. The whole city was on fire, man. We had fires all the time. It's true. We're doing a heck of a better job of preventing fires now than we did just 30 years ago. And it shows in the statistics. So I want everybody to understand that fact, because whenever there's a big fire and people get displaced, and a lot of this, as we know, is about people getting displaced in the city and the cost of living in the city. You can't just go down the street and get another apartment. You lose your rent-controlled apartment, you're probably out of the city. And that's got a lot of people's attention. But truly, truly, there are a lot less fires than there were 30 years ago.
Thank you, Mickey. One of the things that I've seen is that when we do have the fires, they're very devastating because of the displacement and the fact, as you said, we do not have the housing. And so and the other thing that we're seeing is, and let's look at the Mission as an example, the density in the Mission right now, and the fact that people are living in unauthorized areas makes this particularly a very scary situation. So while the averages may be down, the fact is when these fires occur, it's really has a great impact because of the lack of housing and also the impact on city services to try and help get the individuals who are now homeless or displaced into housing. It's so much more difficult now to do. So with that, I still think that even though this is occurring maybe with less frequency, the urgency is still great because of what we're looking at as far as housing in the city. And it's not going to get, I mean, the housing is still getting older as we speak. And so from that standpoint, we still have codes that haven't really been, and the housing code in particular, really looked at as far as what perhaps should be the requirements since the 60s. So that is something that I do think that is very legitimate for the task force to look at, but thank you again for that, because I was very well educated from what you did at that particular, in fact, I even reviewed it the other day in preparation for this, so thank you. Any other public comment on this? Any other general public comment?
Actually, I just really want to thank you for your remarks, Rosemary. I think that, it seems that the last rash of fires have affected the most vulnerable populations, whether they're living in a store or living in a densely populated building. Actually, the density of population is actually reduced in the Mission with the increased development. But in the older buildings, we see it increasing. And so, as in terms of like the earlier item of prioritization of, I think that's just what generally we're hoping to see. This fire safety task force just take a look at how the most vulnerable populations could be protected.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Jim?
I do have one, because I don't know where it fits in with everything we're doing, and this is from an electrical perspective.
Thank you.
Knowing the housing code. The housing code only requires one plug per room, exception of the kitchen. Totally outdated with our new world. And that could be, as people are talking about, extension cords causing fires, which we know could be addressed. I don't know where that fits into.
Explain that you are the chair of the housing subcommittee of this code advisory committee.
Chair of the housing subcommittee and chair of the electrical plumbing, mechanical life safety. So I get all this coming through me all the time. So.
Thank you. So before we adjourn, a couple of housekeeping items, and that is that the tape for today's meeting will be uploaded to DBI's website, which can be found at sfdbi.org. And then if you go into most requested, you'll be able to go to the page that will be dealing with the task force. And Lily Magis, do you want to talk about that at all, that particular part of our web? This is our DBI's communications director. Here's your chance to talk about the wonderful work you did putting that together for us.
Hi everyone, good evening. So we do have a page on the Emergency Fire Safety Task Force, there's the official name. But there is also a direct link already to that page that we've put up. We do have the tentative dates as well as the topics that you guys got a copy of. It's also on our events calendar, and you'll be able to reference that. I know, Rosemary, you just mentioned about the audio. We're still trying to figure that out with DT and others, but we should be able to make that available. If you have any requests, I can send you the link for the members if you want it. I've been in touch with their public information officers already, so they have those.
And Lily, do we anticipate any kind of link to the fire department's website?
It's already there.
Thank you.
So on
Thank
the
you.
fire safety working page, which again, we can send out the link to, or you can just go sfdbi.org Fire Safety Task Force, one word. And so we link out to the different departments just to your homepage. As I said, I've been in touch with your PIOs already. So if you do get any questions about media, you can send them to me, or I'll work with your PIOs as well.
Thank you. And as documentation and any other information is developed through future meetings of the task force, we'll go ahead and put that on our website. I also want to acknowledge before we adjourn Christina Bailey from our Technical Services Division. Thank you for being here. She'll be assisting with us with technical support as we move through this. So with that, if there isn't any more public comment, we are adjourned. See you at our next meeting, which is September 8th from 10 to 12. I will not be here for that meeting, and so we'll have someone else chair that particular meeting. Why am I looking at you? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. So you're